This is from USA Today. Louisiana law isn't about 10 commandments. It's Christian nationalist bait for the Supreme Court. I hope a majority of justices, many of whom claim to value the original intent of the men who wrote the Constitution, stick with the guiding principles in the Establishment Clause.
Spend enough time listening to politicians, and eventually one of them will tell you the truth. I can't wait to be sued, Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry declared 4 days before signing a law last week mandating that all public classrooms, from kindergarten to college, display a Protestant Christian version of the Ten Commandments. Landry made that declaration not in his state's capital, but nearly 600 miles away in Nashville, Tennessee, where he was the keynote speaker at a fundraiser for the Tennessee Republican Party. Courting his party's Christian nationalists with controversy is an excellent way to boost a fellow's national profile. Getting sued and maybe having that case go to the U.S. Supreme Court, where a few justices might be willing to toss overboard decades of precedent, is even better. Again, Landry was so giddy about those prospects that he didn't even notice when a young girl standing behind him during Wednesday's signing ceremony fainted and collapsed to the floor. If you want to respect the rule of law, you've got to start from the original lawgiver, which was Moses, Landry said as others rushed to the girl's aid. An analogy about priorities was born. What's the takeaway? This has nothing to do with children or education, and everything to do with rolling back constitutional protection of and from religion.
The first 10 words of the First Amendment in the Bill of Rights in America's Constitution are about protecting us from the kinds of laws Landry just signed. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion, it starts, before adding, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. The Trump campaign telling lies. Trump's daughter-in-law vows to protect the vote. He tried to steal the election in 2020. The Bill of Rights is a list of priorities. Most people put the most important stuff at the top when drawing up a list. The Supreme Court since 1947 was held that the First Amendment guaranteeing for freedom from religion and freedom of religion, known as the Establishment Clause, applies to state governments. Heather Weaver is as eager to sue Landry as he is to be sued. A lawyer for the American Civil Liberties Union, Weaver told me that a lawsuit is coming this week because this issue was already settled by the Supreme Court 44 years ago when it struck down a Kentucky law requiring the posting of the Ten Commandments in classrooms. The nation's highest court also ruled in 2005 that 3 Kentucky counties violated the Establishment Clause by displaying the Ten Commandments in courthouses and public schools. Both cases were 5-4 rulings with conservative justices on the losing side. This is a different Supreme Court, with a conservative supermajority stocked with justices. Samuel Alito comes to mind, convinced that Christians in America are somehow under threat. Alito made the claim in a college speech in May and was secretly recorded this month agreeing with an undercover liberal activist who told him that America should return to a place of godliness. Richard C. Schrager, a professor at the University of Virginia School of Law, said some justices have been open in recent rulings to personal displays of religiosity in some secular public spaces. The court in 2022 sided with the public high school football coach who lost his job for praying on the field after games. Republicans wail about secure elections while slashing funding for election security. The Louisiana law could bridge those individual actions to institutional displays because it leans into a legal test favored by some justices about religion reflecting not just faith, but history and tradition. I think they are leaning in the direction of permitting these kinds of religious practices in schools and elsewhere, Schrager told me. I think that test is designed to be more sympathetic to those kinds of practices.
Rachel Lacer, who leads Americans United for Separation of Church and State, will join the ACLU in the lawsuit. She agrees that Landry is eager to have that fight at the Supreme Court. It's no secret that the Supreme Court is sympathetic to the Christian nationalists' agenda, with the way they've been ruling in many cases, Lasser said. The court's rulings are emboldening Christian nationalists to try to get cases before them that ends long-standing precedents in ways that favor conservative Christianity over America's commitment to religious freedoms for all.
Do you have anything to say about religion in schools?
Oh, you want my comments on religion?
Yeah.
Your faith, while you may feel is the one and only faith, other faiths feel that same way. If you are trying to force your Christianity, trying to force your religion, you wouldn't want them to have Allah everywhere. You wouldn't want them to have Buddha everywhere. So don't force your belief down someone else's throat unless you want them to force their belief down yours. Yeah, I think but I do think it's a big part of them trying to get it to the Supreme Court so they can continue throwing us back into an era that was only great for a white male. I do not think it's right. I do not agree with it. I am fine if you want to be Christian. I am fine if you want to be any type of religion, but you shouldn't force it on other people. That's not the teaching. The teaching is not make them believe or eradicate them. That's not it. It's supposed to be love your neighbor.
I mean, it has been that for a while. But...
It has, and that's one of the big reasons I really don't like religion, because it's just a giant hypocrisy. Plus, what's the point in having the 10 Commandments when people just go to church on Wednesday, Sunday, don't listen to a thing that's said, zone out for 30 minutes, walk out the door, and do the complete opposite of everything that they were just preaching.
And it's like the worst people you've ever met.
Yeah,
It was Oklahoma Supreme Court or Capitol building. They put the satanic goat somewhere on the steps, and everybody freaked out, and they had to take down all of the Christian stuff they had up.
Okay.
You're talking about Christian supremacy.
Where's our freedom? Where's our rights? Where's our rights? Keep your fairy tale book out of kids' schools.
Put D&D stuff everywhere.
Fucked up. I want Wiccan things everywhere.
Right. In 7th grade science, my teacher refused to teach us evolution, instead teaching us about Adam and Eve in the Bible. I don't have a larger point about that, but I'm pretty sure he still has a job. And I had a teacher who was giving extra credit for kids who went out and watched movies about historical movies. And the what she wanted everyone to go watch was Passion of the Christ. And I went and seen Troy, and she wouldn't give me extra credit because she said it wasn't historical or something. But Passion of the Christ is historically accurate.
Wow.
Small towns.
Come from a very religious area too.
Yeah, it's traumatizing for sure.
My pee-pee don't work, and my doctor stopped giving me Viagra.
This is sad.
Oh yeah, this one. Yeah.
Oh, it reminds me. I forgot to take my Zyprexa today. Disorganized thoughts.
Yeah, essentially.
I don't think you're scooting close enough.
Murder conviction of Missouri woman overturned after 43 years in prison. Prison term of Sandy Hemme, 63, longest known wrongful conviction of a woman in U.S. history. A Missouri woman who was imprisoned for more than 40 years for murder has had her conviction overturned by a judge who found clear and convincing evidence that she was innocent of the killing in question. Sandy, who is 63 now, was convicted of and sentenced to life imprisonment for the 1980 slaying of Patricia Jeschke, a library worker in St. Joseph, Missouri, after Sandy made statements to the police incriminating herself while she was a psychiatric patient. On Friday, Livingston County Circuit Judge Ryan Horstman ruled that evidence directly ties the killing of Jeschke to a local police officer who later went to prison for another crime and has since died. Sandy, who has spent the last 43 years behind bars, must be freed within 30 days unless the prosecutors decide to retry her, the judge said. The ruling came after an evidentiary hearing in January where Sandy's legal team presented arguments supporting her evidence. Sandy's prison term marks the longest known wrongful conviction of a woman in U.S. history. Her attorney with the Innocent Project, a criminal justice nonprofit, said,
We are grateful to the court for acknowledging the grave injustice Ms. Hemme has endured for more than 4 decades, her attorney said in a statement. Sandy initially pleaded guilty to capital murder in exchange for avoiding the death penalty, but her conviction was thrown out on appeal. According to the Associated Press, she was convicted again in 1985 after a one-day trial in which the only evidence against her was her confession. In a 147-page petition seeking her exoneration, attorneys argued the authorities ignored Hemi's wildly contradictory and factually impossible statements while she was a patient at a psychiatric hospital. Been there. Sandy, then 20, was receiving treatment for auditory hallucinations, derealization, and drug use when she was targeted by the police, her attorney said. Beginning from the age of 12, fucking Christ.
It's hard to say. Inpatient.
But since 12, though, it fucking sucks.
Yes, yeah. That's what I was saying. Like, one of the hardest things reading through that is realizing that literally she has no one in her life since that age that has had her back. And that fucking fucks me up.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Over a series of hours-long interviews, Sandy gave conflicting statements about the murder while being treated with antipsychotic drugs, her attorney said. At some points, she was so heavily medicated that she was unable to even hold her head up, and she was restrained and strapped to a chair, they wrote. Detectives noted that Sandy seemed mentally confused and not able to comprehend their questions. Stephen Fuston, a retired St. Joseph Police Department detective, testified that he stopped one of the interviews because she didn't seem totally coherent. A pig with a conscience. Police exploited her mental illness and coerced her into making false statements while she was sedated and being treated with antipsychotic medication. I take that back. No good pigs. They alleged that authorities at the time suppressed evidence that implicated Michael Holman, then a 22-year-old police officer who had tried to use the victim's credit card. Holman's truck was spotted near the crime scene, and a pair of earrings identified by Jeschke's father were found in Holman's possession. Holman had been a suspect and was questioned at the time. Many of the details uncovered during the investigation into Holman were never given to Hemi's attorneys. Holman was investigated for insurance fraud and burglaries and spent time in prison. He died in 2015. In his ruling Friday, Horstman wrote that no evidence whatsoever outside of Mrs. Hemi's unreliable statements connects her to the crime, adding to those statements had been taken while she was in psychiatric crisis and physical pain. In contrast, this court finds that the evidence directly ties Holman to this crime and murder scene, Horstman wrote. He said prosecutors had failed to disclose evidence that would have helped Hemi's defense and that her trial counsel had fallen below professional standards. The Missouri Attorney General Office, which fought to uphold her conviction, did not immediately comment on the judge's ruling, the Kansas City Star reported. That pisses me off.
So, a couple other things that I had found out. Jeschke was found with pantyhose wrapped around her arms and her legs, and she was strangled to death. But they found a knife laying underneath her head. And then Sandy, who had went into a mental episode while just recently being released from a psychiatric inpatient facility, she went to an old nurse's home that she knew for essentially help. She was hiding in the nurse's closet with a knife, and that's why they were like, oh yeah, so clearly she did it. A few days after she gets her medication finally stabilized, she said that she didn't know she did it until she read about it in the paper.
Hold on. You said the victim was strangled and she had a knife?
Because I was like, these don't, it's not even the same fucking knife. Like, these two things don't...
That's the thing about being mentally ill, is that people just take advantage of you. Most people don't respect the mentally ill, especially not police.
ERs aren't dealt to handle any kind of psychiatric episode of any form, which is evident all the time, because that unfortunately is the first point of contact for a lot of people who do have any kind of mental health problems, because they can't get in to see a general physician or a psychiatrist or a general physician. They have to wait like 3 months to see just a PCP. Once you get a PCP finally established and you're trying to now get a psychiatrist before you have a mental episode that you feel is coming on, now you gotta wait 6 to 7 months before they are available. But you're about to have a full blown episode. Like, you need help now, and that's why you're supposed to be able to go to the ER and get that emergency room help. But they don't know how to deal with people.
They just throw you in the mental institution.
They just pump you full of as many drugs as they can and send you to the next open bed.
Because we all go crazy at the same time. The moon's really weird.
So, from some stupid fucking shit that's happening to some stupid fucking shit that's happening to the worst stupid shit that's fucking happening. Oh, God. You know, I think if I was a CNN, MSNBC, Fox journalist, whatever, I think it would really fucking hurt my ego if TikTok was doing better reporting than me. Because you're supposed to be, like, the news.
That's why they want to ban it.
This is from CNN. Israeli military straps injured Palestinian man to hood of Jeep. The Israeli military strapped an injured Palestinian man to the hood of a military vehicle during an operation on Saturday in the occupied West Bank. Video shows the man lying across the front of the Israeli Jeep as it drove through a neighborhood of Jenin. The man appeared slumped on the hood of the vehicle as it drove past Palestinian ambulances. The medics said the Israeli military had prevented its crew from providing first aid to an injured man in Jenin. In response to questions about the incident, the Israeli Defense Forces, or IDF, said Saturday that its forces violated orders and standard operating procedures and an investigation would be launched. The conduct of the forces in the video of the incident does not conform to the values of the IDF. The incident will be investigated and dealt with accordingly, the IDF said in a statement. Basically, they are making the same excuse that they make about everything that they do wrong.
Hey, we're going to investigate ourselves, and we found that we didn't do anything wrong.
The IDF said the incident happened Saturday morning during counterterrorism operations to apprehend suspects in the Wadi Burqin area west of Jenin. It said the man was a suspect.
Yeah, I know. I have trouble with this one too. Don't get mad.
As in, it's a load of shit. It's a load of shit.
This
Going to be honest. They're never going to be honest. They're not going to be like, yes, I found myself guilty.
Right.
Okay. It said the man was a suspect who was injured and apprehended after an exchange of fire. There has been an uptick in violence in the occupied West Bank since the start of Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza began in October, following the militant group's unprecedented and deadly attacks on Israel. More than 500 Palestinians, including over 100 children, have been killed in the West Bank since October 7th, according to the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. Almost 3/4 of those fatalities took place during operations by Israeli forces, the UN agency said. As well as Israeli military raids in the West Bank, there has been an increase in violence carried out by Israeli settlers against Palestinians. More than 700,000 Jewish settlers live in the West Bank and East Jerusalem in settlements that are considered illegal under international law and widely seen as one of the main obstacles to a two-state solution.
You know something?
Hmm.
There's no Hamas in the West Bank. It pisses me off, I know.
Yeah. And I have no choice but to cry, because what else am I going to do?
There's no Hamas in the West Bank!
Yeah.
This is from Reuters. This is from Reuters. Israeli strikes kill at least 42 in Gaza, Enclave's government media office says. At least 42 people were killed in Israeli attacks on districts of Gaza City in the north of the Palestinian enclave on Saturday. One Israeli strike on houses in Al-Shati, one of Gaza Strip's 8 historic refugee camps, killed 24 people. Another 18 Palestinians were killed in a strike on houses in the Al-Tufa neighborhood. The Israeli military released a brief statement saying, a short while ago, IDF fighter jets struck 2 Hamas military infrastructure sites in the area of Gaza City.
Were they under a hospital?
Hamas did not comment on the Israeli claim to have hit its military infrastructure. It said in a statement the attacks targeted the civilian population and vowed in the statement, the occupation and its Nazi leaders will pay the price for their violations against our people. Apparently houses and tents are a military infrastructure. Footage obtained by Reuters showed dozens of Palestinians rushing out to search for victims amid the destroyed houses. The footage showed wrecked homes, blasted walls and debris, and dust filling the street in Shati refugee camp. Israel's ground and air campaign in Gaza was triggered when Hamas-led militants stormed into southern Israel on October 7th, killing around 1,200 people and seizing more than 250 hostages, according to Israeli tallies. The offensive has left Gaza in ruins, killed more than 37,000 people, of whom 100 were killed in the past 24 hours, and left nearly the entire population homeless and destitute. More than 8 months into the war, Israel's advance is now focused on the last areas its forces had yet to seize, Rafah on Gaza's southern edge and the area surrounding Deir al-Balah in the center. Residents said Israeli tanks deepened their incursion into western and northern Rafah areas in recent days. On Saturday, Israeli forces bombed several areas from air and the ground, forcing many families living in areas described as humanitarian design zones to leave northwards. They're telling them to go back north? I mean, that sounds like a major military offensive, so where's your red line, Jack? Where's Biden at?
He doesn't know.
He
forgot.
He doesn't know.
We know, Grandpa. It's okay.
Grandpa Joe touched my leg!
Kids used to pet his leg, and now he wants to pet mine. Yeah, did we just all forget about him kissing
his granddaughter? I think so. The Israeli military said forces continued precise, intelligence-based targeted operations in Rafah, killing many Palestinian gunmen and dismantling military infrastructure. On Friday, the Gaza Health Ministry said at least 25 Palestinians were killed in Ma'awasi in western Rafah and 50 wounded. Palestinians said a tank shell hit a tent housing displaced families. The Israeli military said that the incident was under review. An initial inquiry conducted suggests that there is no indication that a strike was carried out by the IDF in the humanitarian area in Al-Maswati, it said. So we got 40,000 dead civilians, and you want to continue to talk about your U.S. payer-funded precision bombs? So let's go by the numbers from Euromed Monitor, and these figures have not been updated since April 4th. So that's
2 months.
Something like that. I don't know. 42,500 dead, 77,250 wounded, 39,000 civilians dead, 16,000 children dead, 10,000 women dead, 140 journalists killed, 2 million displaced, 450 schools destroyed, 1,000 healthcare workers killed, 30 hospitals destroyed, 70 clinics destroyed, over 200 ambulances destroyed. So they see the Palestinians as cancer. They must get rid of them.
But they're people. They're just people. I don't understand why the eradication of a whole people is just so widely accepted. It doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't.
This is from Middle East Monitor. The looming famine in Gaza is an extension of Israel's exertion of colonial power.
Those numbers were updated in April. Those 2 months, they've probably killed more than they did in that since that report was done. Since October last year, it is estimated that approximately 70,000 tons of bombs have been dropped by Israel on the Palestinian civilian population in Gaza. With famine looming in Gaza, the current death toll figures are set to be eclipsed, with the most recent warning from the Food and Agricultural Organization of the UN projecting that over 1 million people, more than half of Gaza's population, that's left anyway, will face death by starvation by mid-July. This catastrophic analysis makes it clear that in the absence of meaningful international aid intervention and an end to this latest onslaught against the Palestinian population, more civilians will die due to enforced starvation than as a direct result of unprecedented Israeli military bombardment. It is important to be clear that this famine is entirely man-made. It is equally important to identify who is responsible. With backing from Western allies who have continued to send military aid to Israel whilst failing to intervene meaningfully and secure a ceasefire, Israel has been given a green light to enforce starvation on the Palestinian population in Gaza. It is a tactic deployed routinely by colonial powers to exert dominance over a colonized people. The current starvation of the civilian population in Gaza, therefore, involves numerous intersecting factors, all of which relate directly to Israel's decades-long and enduring domination over Palestinian lives and livelihoods. By preventing humanitarian aid supplies from entering the Gaza Strip, whilst imposing additional layers of bureaucratic hurdles to control what can and cannot be let in, Israel continues to create the conditions that perpetrate and even accelerate the starvation of Palestinians living in the Strip. Attacks on civilian infrastructure in Gaza, including the apparatus needed to provide and distribute food to the Palestinian population, we suggest is a deliberate Israeli military tactic, and the evidence stacks up. Water sanitation stations, factories for producing food, aid warehouses, bakeries, and flour mills have all been targeted routinely by Israeli military bombardment. Alongside infrastructure, those responsible for delivering life-saving aid have also been singled out for attack. Hence, this manufactured famine cannot be analyzed in isolation, but must be seen within the context of decades of colonial practices that have targeted Palestinians, attempting to erase both their physical and historical presence in Palestine. Indeed, since the start of the blockade against Gaza in 2007, Israel has engaged in a policy of enforced food insecurity through discriminatory and multi-layered policies, including the monitoring of certain foodstuffs that are and are not permitted entry into the Strip. Siege warfare, illegal under international law, has meant that Palestinians' daily calorie intake in Gaza is monitored and controlled by the occupation state, with food essentials such as meat, dairy, fruits, and vegetables becoming a luxury. According to a report released by Oxfam, food insecurity has increased rapidly during the ongoing genocide, to the point whereby the average daily calorie intake for Palestinians living in the north of the Gaza Strip has been decimated to just 245 calories. Holy cow, dude. Is that enough for anything?
That might be enough to power your heart for the day.
Yet those who are scouring the streets for food in Gaza today could receive humanitarian aid in less than 15 minutes if Israel opened the border crossing that is closed purposefully, those crossings being in some instances a mere 5 kilometers away. Consequently, it is unsurprising that both Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his Minister of Defense Yoav Gallant stand accused by the International Criminal Court, ICC, of, amongst other alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity, using starvation as a weapon of war. It was Gallant who made it very clear Israel's intent to starve the Palestinian civilian population in October last year, when he declared a complete siege on Gaza and said there will be no electricity, no food, no fuel. Everything is closed. We are fighting human animals, and we are acting accordingly.
It's one of the key details of fascism, is calling your opponent or people you want to eradicate cancer, animals, what have you.
It could be argued that the international community, with insufficient aid and continued business as usual approach with its well-protected Israeli ally, is complicit in the erasure of Palestinian life. It should also be remembered that international allies, including British Prime Minister-in-Waiting Sir Keir Starmer, were quick to suggest that Israel did, in fact, have a right to turn off water supplies to the Palestinian population in Gaza. that the Israeli state can manufacture a famine that is starving children at the fastest rate ever recorded while simultaneously enjoying impunity is a damning indictment of international law. Forcing starvation on a civilian population who have endured over 8 months of Western-sponsored military bombardment is a stain on the international community and our institutions, one that will be impossible to repair. International intervention must be forthcoming immediately. This is from Reuters. Israel offensive in Lebanon could increase broader war, U.S. general says.
An Israeli offensive in Lebanon has the potential to increase the risk of a broader conflict that draws in Iran and Iran-aligned militants, particularly if Hezbollah's existence is threatened, the top U.S. general said on Sunday. Air Force General C.Q. Brown, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, did not predict Israel's next steps and acknowledge Israel's right to defend itself. But he cautioned that a Lebanon offensive can drive up the potential for a broader conflict. Hezbollah is more capable than Hamas as far as overall capability, number of rockets, and the like, and I would just say I would see Iran be more inclined to provide greater support to Hezbollah, Brown told reporters. Again, all this could help to broaden the conflict in the region and really have Israel not only be worried about what's going on their southern part of the country, but also what's happening in the north. Brown's comments come as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on Sunday that a coming end to the intense phase of fighting in Gaza would allow Israel to deploy more forces along the northern border with Lebanon. Iran-backed Hezbollah began attacking Israel shortly after Hamas's October 7th assault sparked the war in Gaza, and the sides have been trading blows in the months since then. Hezbollah said it would not stop until there is a ceasefire in Gaza. Earlier in June, Hezbollah targeted Israeli towns and military sites with the largest volley of rockets and drones in the hostilities so far, after an Israeli strike killed the most senior Hezbollah commander yet. Brown's remarks came as Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant headed to Washington on Sunday to discuss the next phase of the Gaza war, escalating hostilities on the border with Lebanon. Brown noted that the United States could be more limited in its ability to defend Israel from attacks by Hezbollah than it was in helping intercept Iran's April missile and drone attack on Israel, which was largely thwarted. From our perspective, based on where our forces are, the short range between Lebanon and Israel, it's harder for us to be able to support them in the same way we did back in April, Brown said. This is just now happening according to Al Jazeera. Hezbollah releases a new drone video it says shows sensitive Israeli sites, including military zones in the northern city of Haifa, as the fears grow of an all-out war between the two sides. So there is nothing but escalation between the two countries while Israel commits genocide on Palestinians.
The drone thing, apparently whenever Hezbollah released the drone videos of Israel's military zones, I guess, they threw a huge hissy fit about it, and basically he was like, "You want a war? Let's start a war!"
Everyone wants to start a war, nobody wants to fight one.
No, because that's the thing, they don't fight them. They make the people fight them for them.
They just bomb people like pussies, anyway.
Nobody in their right mind supports war or endless war. And those that do support a war or an endless war are usually the people that have never been in one or seen the side effects of one.
Like John Bolton.
Because they watch movies and they think that it's going to be like this, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. No.
They romanticized American exceptionalism. And also from Al Jazeera, the latest on what Netanyahu has to say. The war will continue even if a ceasefire deal is agreed with Hamas. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has indicated he is open to a partial agreement that would facilitate the return of some captives held in Gaza. He reiterated, however, that he would not agree to any deal that stipulated an end to Israel's war on Gaza, despite previous claims by the United States that an Israeli proposal would be a pathway to finishing the conflict permanently. The goal is to return the kidnapped and uproot the Hamas regime in Gaza, Netanyahu said in an interview with Israeli media.
Wasn't there an Israeli official recently that quoted Hitler?
Yes.
Just let that sink in for a second.
The irony.
The irony also is that basically they're like, look, guys, here's the deal we'll make. We'll give you a couple hostages. You'll give us all your hostages. And then we kill you and the hostages we gave to you. That's all they're saying.
We're going to kill you, give us our hostages.
Yeah. This is from Buenos Aires Times. Poverty has no limit in Argentina. Argentina's food crisis and the profound reason for structural decay. How we reached the current state of emergency from the Kirchners to Malay.
Why should I give them money so they can move politically against me? These are the words of an Argentine president when faced with resolving the flow of money which has become imperiously necessary after the 2001 crisis. In reality, those are not the words of one head of state, but of each of the presidents since then. Nestor Kirchner, Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner, Mauricio Macri, Alberto Fernandez, and now Javier Milei. Political slush funds kill altruism, and that is how we have reached this present, without a compass for an exit route. As any analyst of national history will tell you, Argentina has never overcome the crisis of its model of industrialization via import substitution. As from the 1970s, its job supply contracted, and since the 2008-2009 crisis, job creation has dried up altogether. Half the workers are informally employed. Although the methods of measuring poverty have been modified, there is consensus in accepting that during the revolutionary 1970s, barely reached 6% of the Argentine population were poor, a figure that tripled in the 1980s and continuing to climb, with brief periods of improvement until reaching its historic peak of 55% in 2002, following the major political and economic crisis of the previous year.
Damn.
According to the latest measurement from the INDEC Statistics Bureau from the second half of 2023, poverty affects 41.7% of the population. But a survey of Salvia's Observatory and the Caritas NGO divulged this month updates that indicate 55.5% of Argentines now live in poverty and 17.5% are destitute. In the country inherited by Milei last December, 35% of households were receiving some kind of public assistance. Following the almost immediate devaluation that came soon after the Libertarian took office and the subsequent slump, more people slipped down the scale into destitution and more middle-class people fell below the poverty line. Milei came along with a chainsaw and no promises of welfare. He said it on the campaign trail, and he repeated it more recently at the University of Stanford. The time will come when people will be dying of hunger, and they will have to decide what to do in order somehow not to die. I don't need any external intervention to resolve my consumption, because in the end, somebody is going to work it out, he argued. Although the notoriety of the state squandering money falls on the welfare benefit recipients, social contributions imply barely 2.5% of gross domestic product, while consultants at the Zero firm point out that the biggest amount of support for the government is to be found among those with only primary education, from which their socio-economic level might be inferred. The opinion polls further reveal that the higher the level of education, the less support for the government. At the start of his term, Milei decided to unify the labor, education, childhood and family, and culture portfolios into a new human capital ministry, a super ministry containing the areas which most challenge his central objective, zero deficit. The president placed at its head his pal Sandra Pettivello, a journalism and domestic sciences graduate who is a complete beginner when it comes to public administration. Her dual role consists in restricting budgets to keep the presidential Excel spreadsheet on an even keel and proclaiming clear messages in the libertarian culture war, like announcing the direct delivery of social plans without intermediaries or sitting on top of food supplies in order to evaluate without haste to whom and how to transfer them. But earlier this month, everything has slipped out of control, precisely when the focus of the media agenda has been on the government denunciations of picket leaders and cooperatives suspended of extorting social plan beneficiaries, the existence of ghost soup kitchens, and other irregularities. Presidential spokesman Manuel Adorni, who had denied the existence of withheld food, said in reality they were rightly hoarded in case of catastrophe. And this is from the DW. Argentina, less inflation, more poverty under Milei. With new Argentinian President Javier Milei expected in Germany at the weekend, DW takes a look at what he has done so far to tackle the country's entrenched economic turmoil. Argentina's right-wing populist economic liberal president, Javier Milei, has now been in office for around 6 months. In a country long mired in economic turmoil, his radical economic plans appealed to voters during the election campaign. The self-described anarcho-capitalist is likely to tout the success of his policies when he meets with the German government representatives in Berlin this weekend as a part of a European diplomatic tour, but experts say results have been mixed. A tradition of protectionism has also severely damaged Argentina, according to Hans Holtmann. A number of points in Milei's economic policy for more positive economic development in the country point in the right direction, focus on less government spending and bureaucracy as well as more freedom for companies and free trade, he told DW. Holtzman also thinks Milei has had some success in the fight against high inflation, 25% per month last December to 4.2% this May. Milei's drastic austerity measures have also led to budget surpluses. But such success needs to be sustainable, Holtzman added. There is still a lot to be done in improving supply conditions and thus reaching more growth, local and international investment and employment in the country. Economist Hernan Lecher, director of the Argentine Center for Economic Policy, takes a more critical view. He believes the victims of Milei's deregulation policy and austerity measures are ordinary people, not what Milei has described as the caste. It's a word Milei used during his election campaign to describe the network of governing politicians and their allies. However, pensioners, public sector, and construction workers are now affected, Lecher said. Immediately after taking office, Milei devalued the national currency, the peso, by more than 50% against the US dollar. Although this makes exports cheaper and more competitive, imports are now more expensive. Researchers at the Catholic University in Buenos Aires also see the devaluation of the peso as one of the main reasons for the further increase in the poverty rate, which rose from 45% to 57% after Milei took office, the highest level in 20 years. This means that around 27 million Argentinians now live below the poverty line. Added to this is the 5.3% slump in economic output, as well as weak figures for industrial production and economic activity indicators. If people are starving, the market will provide. That's what he thinks. Anarcho-capitalism doesn't work. Never has worked.
Milton Friedman was wrong.
Ayn Rand was wrong.
Karl Marx vindicated.
This is from Media Matters for America, a guide to Project 2025, the extreme right-wing agenda for the next Republican administration. Project 2025 aims to roll back civil rights and destroy the federal government, among other proposals.
Make America great again.
Project 2025, a comprehensive transition plan organized by right-wing think tank, the Heritage Foundation to guide the next GOP presidential administration, is the conservative movement's most robust policy and staffing proposal for the potential second Trump White House, and its extreme agenda represents a threat to democracy, civil rights, the climate, and more. Project 2025 focuses on packing the next GOP administration with extreme loyalists, former President Donald Trump.
former president and currently convicted felon.
The plan aims to reinstate Schedule F, a Trump-era executive order that makes federal employees fireable at will, stripping tens of thousands of employees of civil service protections. Both Trump and others in the conservative movement have said they will clear out the federal government if he is reelected. The project has even set up online trainings and loyalty tests to narrow down potential hires to those who will commit to follow Trump without question. As Project 2025 senior advisor John McKenty has said, the number one thing you're looking for is people that are aligned with the agenda.
That's scary, too.
The Heritage Foundation's nearly 900-page policy book, titled Mandate for Leadership, A Conservative Promise, describes Project 2025's priorities and how they would be implemented, broken down by departments in the federal bureaucracy and organized around 4 pillars that will collectively pave the way for an effective conservative administration: a policy agenda, personnel, training, 180-day playbook. Written primarily by former Trump officials and conservative commentators connected to the Heritage Foundation, these proposals would severely inhibit the federal government's protections around reproductive rights, LGBTQ, civil rights, climate change efforts, and immigration. So basically, a Handmaid's Tale. Project 2025's goals for staffing the next GOP presidency reflect Trump's idea to gut civil service staff and replace them with potentially tens of thousands of MAGA loyalists. The New York Times describes this plot for a second Trump administration as an expansion of presidential power over the machinery of government that would reshape the structure of the executive branch to concentrate far greater authority directly into his hands. This is fascism. Project 2025 has created a training academy for potential employees for the next administration, which provides aspiring appointees with the insight, background knowledge, and expertise in governance to immediately begin rolling back destructive policy and advancing conservative ideas in the federal government. Project 2025 makes it clear the Department of Justice is not independent from the executive branch and implies the agency will be used to take legal retribution against whoever Trump decides to investigate. Project 2025 director Paul Dans recently appeared on Steve Bannon's War Room and encouraged viewers of the far-right broadcast to send in their resumes and participate in Project 2025's trainings in an effort to recruit extreme loyalists to the next GOP administration. Project 2025 aims to put Christianity at the center of American government and society by turning a biblical worldview into federal law, often employing Christian nationalist talking points and narratives to support its right-wing proposals. Vaught's Center for Renewing America, headed by one of Project 2025's top advisors, reportedly listed Christian nationalism as one of the major priorities for his second Trump term.
I'm pretty sure Christianity doesn't allow for you to fuck porn stars while you're married. Practice what you fucking preach, you orange piece of shit.
In discussing plans for the well-being of the American family, Project 2025 claims that centralized government subverts families by working to replace people's natural loves and loyalties with unnatural ones, utilizing the biblical language of natural versus the unnatural. Project 2025 attacks the nauseous tenets or gender ideology and similarly argues these theories poison our children, who are being taught to deny the very creatureliness that inheres in being human and consists in accepting the giveness of our nature as men or women. In the chapter on the Department of Health and Human Services, former Trump HHS official Roger Severino advocates for a future conservative executive to maintain a biblically based, social science reinforced definition of marriage and family.
I'm sorry, you can't pick Trump for that. He is not a biblically based. He fucks porn stars while he's married. How are you gonna say
They
that?
don't give a fuck, dude. They don't give a fuck. What is the expression? Put lipstick on a pony and call it your wife or something? What is it?
I have no idea.
You can put lipstick on a donkey, but it's still an ass?
You can polish a turd, but it's still shit.
Alright.
I've heard that.
While arguing that families comprised of a married mother, father, and their children are the foundation of a well-ordered nation and healthy society. Former Trump official Jonathan Berry's chapter on the Department of Labor states that the Judeo-Christian tradition, stretching back to Genesis, has always recognized fruitful work as integral to human dignity as service to God, neighbor, and family, and claims that Biden's administration is hostile to people of faith. Project 2025 aims for the next conservative administration to attack reproductive rights from several angles, including by removing the term abortion from all federal laws and regulation, reversing abortion pill approval, punishing providers by withdrawing federal health funding, and restricting clinics that provide contraception and STD testing.
Seriously? STD testing? You're
Project 2025 suggests the next conservative administration strike any mention of abortion from government laws, policies, and regulations. In the foreword of the Project 2025 policy book, Heritage President Kevin Roberts writes that a pro-life administration starts by removing the terms abortion, reproductive health, and reproductive rights, among others, out of every federal rule, agency, regulation, contract, grant, regulation, and piece of legislation that exists.
And why do you have any saying over my reproductive rights when you don't even have the same fucking junk that I do? Don't make decisions about my equipment. If you don't have a vajay, don't make decisions about my vajay. If you don't have tits, don't make decisions about my tits. If you ain't got it, don't talk about it.
I have tits though.
You don't have tits. You know, it just... you're gonna remove the words reproductive rights.
That's fucked. Yeah, that part got me. Project 2025 would have the next GOP administration restructure Medicaid to avoid providing reproductive health care and penalize providers who do. The policy book instructs the Department of Health and Human Services to issue guidance re-emphasizing that states are free to defund Planned Parenthood in their state Medicare plans and propose rulemaking to interpret the Medicare statute to disqualify providers for elective abortion. Project 2025 also suggests restoring Trump-era religious and moral exemptions to the contraceptive mandate through the Affordable Care Act that would allow employers to deny coverage. The policy book also proposes requiring education on fertility awareness-based methods of contraception and family planning and suggests eliminating condoms from health resources and service administration guidelines because they are not a women's preventative service. They kind of are, aren't they?
It prevents women from getting pregnant.
I don't know.
Why are you trying to force people to have babies? I'm telling you, they're realizing that our generation is not having kids, and they're afraid that they are not going to have the worker bees that they had to produce and make money continuing for their fucking children.
The policy book directs the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to eliminate any programs or projects that are deemed pro-abortion. In a report detailing Project 2025's proposed crackdown on reproductive and LGBTQ rights, the New Republic writes that Heritage recommends the next conservative administration direct the CDC to eliminate programs and projects that do not respect human life and conscious rights and that undermine family formation. This includes ensuring the CDC is not promoting abortion as a healthcare and instead pivots to a research agenda that supports pro-life policies and explores the harms, both mental and physical, that abortion has wrought on women and girls. Do we care about the trauma of not being able to feed that child?
But what about a child being pregnant? A child whose body is not ready when I was pregnant.
Ages.
This isn't making America great for who? It's not great for me. It's not great for my girls. Because you know what? They're still gonna let their whores, their side pieces, while they're married, you know, religion and all. You want to force it down our throats, but you can't even practice half of what you fucking preach. Abortions
always occur, but it's in our power to make it safe and to make it a part of healthcare.
It's because they're afraid. I'm telling you, I really do think it is because they are afraid of losing the working class. I think that they're afraid that there's not going to be enough slaves to produce for their children. Are we making it legal for men to be castrated if they're stepping out on their families? Because that doesn't go with your little fucking marriage shit. Are we gonna do that? It's disgusting.
Heritage directs the administration to roll back Biden-era policies that allowed abortion access in some circumstances at VA hospitals. In this chapter on the Department of Defense, the book recommends reversing policies that allow the use of public monies to facilitate abortion for service members. The policy book subtly promotes anti-surrogacy positions, writing that all children have a right to be raised by the men and women who conceive them. The policy book would reverse a Biden administration policy that requires hospitals to offer abortion in medical emergencies regardless of state bans.
Surrogacies, that's the people that get pregnant because the woman can't get pregnant because maybe she has something wrong.
Yeah,
or
but
he's
it
got
was
something wrong.
it's God's will that doesn't have children.
Oh.
Actually, this is more crazy. It reversed requires hospital to offer abortions in medical emergency regardless of state bans. That's crazy because that means no, you just die now. Project 2025 aims to end all fetal cell research and ensure that abortion and embryo destructive related research become both fully obsolete and ethically unthinkable. In the eyes of pro-Trump Republicans and their right-wing media allies, the Department of Justice and the FBI have long been corrupted by left-wing ideology and the bureaucratic deep state. Now, Project 2025 seeks to radically reshape federal law enforcement for the benefit of a conservative strongman. Its chapter by former Trump DOJ official Gene Hamilton states that anything other than a top-to-bottom overhaul will only further erode the trust of significant portions of the American people and harm the very fabric that holds together our constitutional republic. Project 2025 claims that the DOJ has become a bloated bureaucracy with a critical core of personnel who are infatuated with the perpetuation of a radical liberal agenda and the defeat of perceived political enemies. Jesus fuck. Citing the FBI's handling of the Russian hoax of 2016, big tech collusion, and the suppression of Hunter Biden's laptop in 2020, Project 2025 calls for a future GOP administration to immediately review all FBI investigations and terminate any that are unlawful or contrary to the national interest.
Project 2025 calls for initiating legal action against progressive prosecutors, citing local government officials who supposedly deny American citizens the equal protection of the laws by refusing to prosecute criminal offenses in their jurisdictions. Project 2025 proposes the next conservative president should enforce the death penalty where appropriate and applicable. Project 2025 claims that Biden administration has enshrined affirmative discrimination in all aspects of its operations under the guise of equity and vows to reverse this trend by attacking so-called diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI for short. DEI offices have become the vehicles for this unlawful discrimination. So it's just they don't understand what it means, so they want to.
They don't understand it, so fuck it. So like they just boogeyman.
Project 2025 calls to reassign election-related offenses to the criminal division of the DOJ rather than the civil rights division, claiming otherwise voter registration fraud and unlawful ballot correction will remain federal election offenses that are never appropriately investigated and prosecuted. This is still about him crying about losing the election, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
This change would allow a second Trump administration to provide more resources for investigations into bogus claims of voter fraud and bolster efforts to overturn future election results. So it's a fucking dictatorship. Project 2025 takes extreme positions against LGBTQ rights, seeking to eliminate federal protections for queer people and pursue research into conversion pursue research into conversion therapies in order to encourage gender and sexuality conformity. The policy book also lays out plans to criminalize being transgender and prohibit federal programs from supporting queer people through various policies. Project 2025 calls for the next Secretary of Health and Human Services to immediately put an end to the department's foray into woke transgender activism, which includes removing terms related to gender and sexual identity from every federal rule, agency regulation, contract, grant, regulation, and piece of legislation that exists. The Trump administration proposed a similar idea in 2018 that would have resulted in trans people losing protections under anti-discrimination laws. The policy book calls for HHS to stop all research related to gender identity unless the purpose is conformity to one's sex assigned at birth. The New Republic explains that is research on gender non-conforming children and teenagers should be funded by the government, but only for the purpose of studying what will make them conform, such as denying them gender-affirming care, and instead trying to change their identities through counseling, which is a form of conversion therapy. The policy books forward by Kevin Roberts describes the omnipresent propagation of transgender ideology and sexualization of children as pornography that should be outlawed, adding the people who produce and distribute it should be imprisoned. Roberts also says that educators and public librarians who purvey it should be classed as registered sex offenders, and telecommunications and technology firms that facilitate its spread should be shuttered. I bet he's gay. Roberts' forward states that allowing parents or physicians to reassign the sex of a minor is child abuse and must end. It doesn't happen. Echoing ongoing right-wing attacks on trans athletes, Roberts also claims bureaucrats of the Department of Justice force school districts to undermine girls' sports and parents' rights to satisfy transgender extremists. I mean, he loves trans people. I bet he's going to be one of those people that gets caught sucking off a tranny. You know what I mean? Which is fine. If you want to suck off a tranny, suck off a tranny. Just stop trying to take their rights. Project 2025 plans to use the Department of Justice to crack down on states that do not charge LGBTQ plus people and their allies with crimes under the pretense that they are breaking federal and state laws against exposing minors to pornography. So what about adult LGBTQ plus people and adult LGBT plus people? Is it still considered minors in pornography? Like, what if it's just like an adult gay person than an adult gay person?
They're breaking federal law.
Would they still be breaking federal law?
I don't know. It just basically says they're breaking the law by being LGBTQ, I think. Because it says under the pretense that they're breaking the law, so they're...
And against... yeah.
It's confusing if you think about it.
Project 2025 also calls for the Centers of Medicare and Medicaid Services to repeat its 2016 decision CMS could not issue a National Coverage Determination, or NCD, regarding gender reassignment surgery for Medicare beneficiaries. The policy book's HHS chapter continues. In doing so, CMS should acknowledge the growing body of evidence that such interventions are dangerous and acknowledge that there is insufficient scientific evidence to support such coverage in state plans. Going further, Project 2025 also demands that the next GOP administration reverse policies that allow transgender individuals to serve in the military. The policy book's chapter on the Defense Department claims gender dysphoria is incompatible with the demands of military service and the use of public monies for transgender surgeries.
Project 2025 would eliminate environmental protections and further delay climate action. In the foreword, Heritage President Kevin Roberts calls environmentalism a pseudo-religion, claiming environmental extremism is decidedly anti-human because it promotes population control and economic aggression by regarding human activity itself as fundamentally a threat to be sacrificed to the God of nature.
Are you fucking serious? Dude, they're the ones that's trying to force their religions.
Yeah, talk about forcing someone else's God down your throat.
Like, how dare you guys?
The Department of Energy chapter in the policy book, written by the former Federal Energy Regulatory Commission head Bernard McNamee, calls for eliminating 3 agency offices that are crucial for the energy transition and reducing funding to different agencies related to renewable energy. An entire chapter dedicated to the Environmental Protection Agency, written by former Trump EPA Chief of Staff Mandy, gonna not pronounce your name right, calls for shrinking the agency by firing new hires and eliminating the Environmental Justice Department.
They really do just want us all to die.
Project 2025 proposes to severely roll back both legal and unauthorized immigration through a number of untested, novel approaches that extend far beyond the policies of Trump's first term. The plan would potentially make hundreds of thousands of people vulnerable to deportation through the loss of temporary protected status and could ensnare families, those they live with, and other members of their communities.
Dude, this is fun. We're all immigrants.
Project 2025 aims to severely restrict legal immigration to the United States by dismantling the DREAM Act and restricting the DACA program, limiting temporary work visas from countries not on the current eligibility list, and increasing processing and application fees for migrants.
In other words, if you're not from Israel, then we don't want you here. Is that what I'm getting?
In a nice country like Norway.
The eligibility list, I bet you. There are very few countries on that list.
The policy book also suggests restricting T visas, which are temporary visas for certain victims of human trafficking, and U visas, which are given to victims that occur in the U.S. Project 2025 suggests adding a citizenship question to the national census, something that the Trump administration attempted in 2019, but which was blocked by the Supreme Court. As NPR noted, the plan also calls for aligning the mission of the government agency in charge of the next tally of the country's residents with conservative principles. Even people who are simply adjacent to unauthorized immigrants could be punished. Project 2025 would bar U.S. citizens from qualifying for federal housing subsidies if they live with anyone who is not a U.S. citizen or legal permanent resident. Under Project 2025, the next Republican administration would also strip hundreds of thousands of individuals, many of whom have been in the U.S. for decades, of their legal protections by repealing all temporary protected status designations. The Niskanen Center writes, nearly 700,000 individuals would lose legal protections and work authorization by repealing all active TPS designations. Project 2025's proposal for Americans' education system would be one of the most extreme plans yet, calling for the elimination of the Department of Education, getting rid of all teachers' unions, and tearing down regulations on education spending. The first sentence of Project 2025's chapter on the Department of Education simply states, federal education policy should be limited, and ultimately the federal Department of Education should be eliminated. Project 2025 seeks to eliminate the National Education Association's congressional charter, which allows for the existence of teachers' unions, calling it a demonstrably radical special interest group that overwhelmingly supports left-of-center policies and policymakers. The policy also aims at eliminating any policies implemented under the Obama administration that support diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, or so-called critical race theory, arguing that CRT specifically disrupts the values that hold communities together, such as equality under the law and colorblindness. Project 2025's mandate for leadership advises the next administration to rid federal rules and legislation of the term diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI.
The mandate also outlines the ways in which DEI efforts supposedly undermine the purpose of several federal agencies, ignoring the tangible benefits of a diverse workforce in the government. In the foreword to the mandate for leadership, Heritage Foundation President Kevin Roberts calls for the deletion of DEI out of every federal rule, agency, regulation, contract, grant, regulation, and piece of legislation that exists. He states the next conservative president must make the institutions of American civil society hard targets for woke culture warriors. This starts with deleting the terms used to deprive Americans of the First Amendment rights out of every federal rule, agency, regulation, contract, grant, regulation, and piece of legislation that exists. Oh my God, I've said that 4 times. Project 2025 calls for investigating and prosecuting discrimination perpetuated by so-called diversity, equity, and inclusion DEI offices. The Heritage Foundation policy book argues that the DOJ's Civil Rights Division should spend its first year under the next administration using full force of federal resources to investigate and prosecute all state and local governments, institutions of higher education, corporations, and any other private employers who are engaged in discrimination in violation of constitutional and legal requirements. According to the mandate, the U.S. Army's focus on DEI is a detriment to its core warfighting mission. The manual also argues that the Higher Education Act of 1965 should be amended so higher education accreditation agencies are not allowed to leverage their title gatekeeper role to mandate that education institutions adopt diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. Authors call for the next conservative administration to treat the participation of Treasury Department officials in any critical race theory or DEI initiative without objecting on constitutional or moral grounds as per se grounds for termination of employment. The plan outlines details on how to take affirmative steps to expose and eradicate the practice of critical race theory and diversity, equity, and inclusion (DEI) throughout the Treasury Department, including identifying every Treasury official who participated in DEI initiatives and interviewing him or her for the purpose of determining the scope and nature of these initiatives and ensure that such initiatives are completely ended. They also recommended eliminating official DEI rules and a related committee in the Treasury Department according to the mandate. Under the Biden administration, the Treasury Department has appointed a counselor for racial equity, established an adversity committee on racial equity, and created an office for diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. All of these should be eliminated. This is American fascism, and the Dems are asleep at the wheel.
So here's a question. What are 3 policies you would automatically enshrine into the Constitution that in your view would have immediate and positive impacts that wouldn't immediately burn down the country? I guess like shitlib edition. So you go ahead and go first.
Okay. Well, first, I think I would set term limits for Congress so we can get rid of some of the forever politicians. And then I would pack the Supreme Court and make the weights of justice unbiased once more. And then lastly, I would create an agency dedicated to investigating, infiltrating, and subduing the rise of far-right terrorism in America. What about you? What are the 3 policies that you would enshrine?
Well, I'd make all election funding public, all campaign funding public. I would outlaw lobbying, and I would abolish the Electoral College in favor of a popular national vote, like one vote, one person will vote. So this is a video that a few people that I watch covered. It's a viral video on Twitter. I can't find the name of or who to accredit it to. I just wanted us to experience it, I guess. It's about struggling in America.
I don't know how any of you guys are going and going and going. I know you gotta be at the same level of mental health as me. Every day it's something new. Between the fucking news and the fucking stupid Biden and stupid Trump. And this country's fucked. Every day we're spending more and more money. None of us are getting ahead. The rich people are the ones that are fucking getting ahead. I'm tired of struggling. I've done everything I can. And I try to be a good man. I take care of my daughter. I take care of my wife. The best I can. I can't keep going. Every day it's something new. Then on top of that, as if you're not trying to spend money, you have to. Fucking everything's expensive. I own a painting company, I still can't fucking make it. I'm fucking trying, man. I can't look at my daughter and my wife and know I'm failing. I'm fucking done. Everybody wake up. It's time to stand up. It's time to be tired of this. It's our turn to fucking eat. I want to eat. I want my family to eat. I want you guys to eat. Stand up. Let's go. Stand up, man. Let's fucking eat. I'm tired. Let's help each other. I don't care what your political affiliation is. I don't care what fucking color you are. If you are not eating and you're struggling, eat with me. Let's struggle together then. Let's be a team.
Yeah, whatever.
So, I want Joe Biden to look this man in the eyes and tell him how great the economy is doing. The Democrats are delusional if they think it's a good idea to run on this economy. Inflation is eating any working class wage gain since Biden took office in 2021. Inflation has risen 20% while wages only 16%. Regular, everyday people are getting left behind working 2 or 3 jobs. No money, can't eat, can't make a dentist appointment, make too much to be assisted but not enough to live. Where many of us are stuck with a choice of working for a corporation or starving and our children starving. Can't get any of your relatives to watch the Wii One for a rare occasion because the whole family and everyone you know is at work, commuting to or from work, or is trying to recuperate after being at work all day. We are the most productive and overworked first world country. We produce the highest GDP by far, and the workers seem to never reap any of the benefits. Even if that might just be the very basic necessities of life are provided to you if you work, are a child, are a senior, or just a human. It's not hard to figure out why your messaging is falling on unenthusiastic ears. Biden is hemorrhaging support in all sectors except maybe white educated suburbanites and really old people. But that is not going to win an election. This is so piss poor. The Democrats' effort to win this November is appalling. What is the strategy? Biden can barely speak coherently or at all. We have outright fascism at our doorstep. And the message is this economy is great. They want to protect the access to abortion and Trump bad. Biden is losing tons of support over his unyielding support for Israel. He will probably lose Michigan at this point for sure, possibly much of the Rust Belt because his economic message is not being lived by the vast majority of people living in America. What could Biden possibly do? He could run on FDR's second Bill of Rights.
This is from the Cap Times. We need to implement FDR's second Bill of Rights. Every day, everywhere, regular working people are struggling and fighting for their very existence. It's not a left or right political issue. As an American, I was sold a bill of lading on the American dream, that I too could succeed if I worked hard and paid my dues. But for too many Americans, this dream has slipped away. Not because of their doing, but because of policies designed to favor greed over hard work. Policies that bear no responsibility to the American worker, but rather to the greediest among us. I've always believed that the strength of our country lies in the blood, sweat, and tears of the working class. A class whose dreams are simple: to send their child to college and not have to take out a second or third mortgage to do it. To have a good job and make enough to pay the bills and squirrel a little bit for a rainy day. To have a good home. To have medical care that doesn't bankrupt them. And finally, to be able to retire comfortably. And at a more reasonable age, since that keeps getting pushed back further on us as well. These are modest dreams. They are indeed quite humble, but for far too many of us, these dreams are now unattainable. The cost of housing prevents younger generations from buying homes and starting families. The lack of good paying jobs is at epidemic levels because CEOs pay themselves millions and do little to ensure the success of companies. They'd rather ask for a government bailout than take responsibility for their failures. We have family farmers selling off their livelihood to obtain Medicaid insurance so they can receive the medical treatment they need. But then what? When they're healthy enough to return to farming, they can't, because they've sold everything in order to pay for just the medical care that they needed. The Supreme Court has decided that there is no right to public education in this country. And if an alarm isn't going off in your head, I'd be shocked. Because America has always been strongest when the middle class is strong. As I look through history, I'm reminded of the policies that helped create the strongest middle class our country has ever known. They are the policies of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. FDR's policies were designed to bring us out of the Great Depression and build a stronger and better America for tomorrow. Programs we take for granted were developed under his leadership. But what many of us have forgotten is something to which we must give our full attention now. FDR had a dream too. It's one that he announced to the world on January 11th, 1944. His dream was our dream, one that's become known as the Second Bill of Rights. The short version goes like this. Every American has the right to 1. A job, 2. An adequate wage and decent living, 3. A decent home, 4. Medical care, 5. Economic protection during sickness, accident, old age, or unemployment, and 6. A good education. FDR would die on April 12, 1945, not even a year and a half after he announced this dream to America and the rest of the world. Do you notice how I said the rest of the world? It's because after World War II ended, his acolytes helped rebuild France, Germany, Italy, Japan, and so forth. And to the people of these countries in charge of rebuilding their countries, these sounded like some pretty darn good ideas. In fact, all of those countries, in some way, shape, or form, adopted these policies, pieces within their new governments, constitutions, and laws. And today, politicians from both the right and left in America all like to use these countries as examples of what could be. FDR's Second Bill of Rights is something we desperately need to adopt in this country. Not only do they align with what working people want and need, they align with creating a brighter and stronger future for our country. America today has slipped from the top 20 happiest rankings for the first time. President Jimmy Carter spoke of a crisis of confidence. In a speech, he stated the following: "It is a crisis that strikes at the very heart and soul and spirit of our nation, of our national will. We can see this crisis in the growing doubt about the meaning of our own lives and in the loss of unity of purpose for our nation." My point is, there is a line we can draw backwards from the happiness rating to Jimmy Carter's crisis of confidence, and finally to FDR's proposed Second Bill of Rights. It's long past the time that we learned from past mistakes. And as Americans, we need to rally ourselves to a vision of the future that ensures a strong middle class. It's my humble working class belief that the future depends on implementing FDR's forgotten dream. Perhaps then the workers of this country will once again dare to dream too.